I still remember the sound of that chair scraping against the floor. Not because someone was pulling it out for me, but because someone was pushing it away. My name is Elise, and this is the story of how my family taught me that blood means nothing when you're struggling. It was a Sunday evening in Phoenix, Arizona. My parents had invited everyone for dinner. My older brother Nolan, his wife, their 2 kids, my younger sister Haley, and me. I was the last to arrive because I had been working a double shift at the diner where I wait tables. My hands were stained with coffee, my apron smelled like grease, and my feet were throbbing. But I was excited. I hadn't seen my family in weeks. I walked into the dining room and stopped. Every seat was taken. My mom was at the head of the table laughing at something Nolan said. My dad was carving the roast. Haley was on her phone. Nolan's kids were fighting over a bread roll. There was no chair for me. Not even an empty space. I stood there like a ghost waiting for someone to notice. No one did. I finally said, "Hey, where should I sit?" The room went quiet. My mom looked at me like she was surprised I existed. Then my brother Nolan laughed. Not a kind laugh. A mocking one. He said, well, look who finally showed up. We figured you were too busy being broke to join us. I didn't respond. I just waited for my mom to say something. She didn't. Nolan continued. What's the matter, Elise? Can't afford a seat? Don't worry, a Leech doesn't deserve a plate anyway. His wife giggled. My sister Haley looked down at her phone. My dad kept carving the roast like nothing was happening. And my mom? My mom said nothing. She just took a sip of her wine and looked away. That was the moment my heart didn't break. It froze. I turned around, walked out the front door, and drove home in silence. I didn't cry or scream. I just drove. And I made a promise to myself. I would never beg for a seat at their table again. I would build my own. To understand why my brother called me a leech, you need to know my family's history. Nolan is the golden child. He's a real estate agent who drives a nice car and married a woman from a wealthy family. My parents adore him. Haley is the baby, still in college, and still getting her rent paid by our parents. She doesn't work. She doesn't have to. And then there's me. I moved out when I was 18 because I wanted independence. I didn't go to college because I couldn't afford it. I worked retail, then food service, then more food service. I never asked my parents for money. Not once. But because I wasn't successful like Nolan, because I wasn't cute and helpless like Haley, my family treated me like a burden. I paid for my own car, my own apartment, my own groceries. I never missed a bill. But in their eyes, I was still a failure. When Nolan called me a leech, he wasn't being honest. He was being cruel. He knew I had never taken a dime from them. He just wanted to hurt me. And my mom let him. After that dinner, I stopped answering their calls. I stopped showing up to family events. I stopped checking their social media. I needed to heal, and I couldn't do that with them in my life. My mom texted me a few times. Are you okay? We missed you at Easter. Why are you being so dramatic? I didn't respond. My dad never reached out. Nolan sent me a message on my birthday that said, "Hope you're doing well. Let us know when you want to be part of the family again." Part of the family again. As if I was the one who walked away. As if I was the one who called someone a leech. The silence was hard at first. I felt guilty like I was the problem. But slowly I realized something. I wasn't missing them. I was missing the idea of them. The family I wanted didn't exist. So I stopped pretending. I focused on myself. I worked harder at the diner, picked up extra shifts, and started saving money for the first time in years. I didn't have a plan yet, but I had hope. A year into my silence, something unexpected happened. One of the regulars at the diner, a woman named Diane who owned a small catering business, offered me a job. She said, "Elise, you work harder than anyone I've ever seen. I need someone like you on my team." The job paid twice what I was making as a waitress. I took it immediately. Diane taught me everything. How to plan events, how to manage budgets, how to talk to clients. I learned fast because I had no other options. Within 2 years, I was her assistant manager. Within 3 years, Diane decided to retire. She offered to sell me the business for a price so low it felt like a gift. She said, "You earned this. Not because I gave it to you, but because you took it. I used every penny I had saved to buy that catering company. I was 31 years old, and I was finally a business owner. Not a leech. Not a failure. A boss. 2 years after I bought the business, I got an email from my sister Haley. She was getting married. The invitation was formal and cold, like it was sent to a distant cousin instead of a sister. It said, "We would love for you to attend if you feel ready to reconnect with the family." If I feel ready. Not, "We miss you." Not, "We're sorry." Just a conditional invitation. I almost deleted it. But then I had an idea. Haley's wedding was going to be at a fancy venue outside Phoenix. She had hired a caterer, but I knew my family. They would go with the cheapest option possible. So I called the venue and asked who was handling the food. It was a small company I had never heard of. I called the owner and made him an offer he couldn't refuse. I would take over the contract at the same price, but I would provide a higher quality menu. He agreed. Haley had no idea. My family had no idea. They thought they were getting some random caterer. They didn't know they were hiring me. The wedding day arrived. I showed up early with my crew. I wasn't a guest. I was the caterer. I wore my chef's coat and my name tag that said Elise, owner. I set up the buffet, arranged the appetizers, and made sure everything was perfect. Then the guests arrived. My mom walked in first. She didn't recognize me at first because she was too busy looking at the flower arrangements. My dad followed, shaking hands with people. Then Nolan and his family. And finally Haley in her white dress, smiling like a princess. I waited until everyone was seated. Then I walked out to the buffet table to check the food. My mom saw me and her face went white. She said, "Elise." I smiled and said, "Good evening. I hope you enjoy the meal." My team and I worked very hard on it. Nolan stood up and said, "What are you doing here? You weren't invited." I said I wasn't invited as a guest. I was hired. I own the catering company. The table went silent. My dad dropped his fork. Nolan laughed nervously and said, "You own a catering company? How?" I said I worked. For years. While you were calling me a leech, I was building something. My mom started crying and said, "We didn't know. You never told us." I said, "You never asked. You never came to see me. You never apologized for that dinner. You just waited for me to come back so you could treat me like garbage again." Haley looked like she wanted to disappear. My dad wouldn't look at me. Nolan opened his mouth to say something, but I cut him off. I said, "I'm not here to ruin your wedding. I'm here to do my job. The food will be delicious and the service will be professional. But after tonight, don't contact me. Not unless you're ready to apologize. And I mean a real apology, not a half-hearted text message." Then I walked back to the kitchen. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had already said everything I needed to say. The wedding went perfectly. The food was a hit. Guests kept coming up to compliment the caterer. They had no idea that the owner was the black sheep of the family. My mom tried to talk to me at the end of the night. She said, "Elise, please. Can we just talk?" I said, "You had 4 years to talk. You chose silence." I packed up my equipment and left. That was 6 months ago. My mom has called a few times. My dad sent a letter saying he was sorry for any misunderstanding. Nolan hasn't reached out at all. Haley sent me a text thanking me for the food, but nothing else. I don't know if they'll ever change. But I've realized something. I don't need them to change. I built a life without them. A good life. A successful life. And the best part is, they had to eat my food at the most important event of my sister's life. They had to acknowledge, even silently, that the leech they mocked now feeds people for a living. Here is what I learned. Family is not about who sits around your dinner table. Family is about who pulls out a chair for you when you have nothing. My family didn't save me a seat. They called me a leech. And I spent years believing I deserved that treatment. But I didn't. And neither do you. If you are watching this and your family has made you feel small, hear me. You don't need their approval to build something beautiful. You don't need their seat at the table. Build your own table. Invite people who actually love you. And one day, when they come looking for you, you can decide whether to let them in. Not because you owe them, but because you choose to. I am Elise. I own a catering company. And I never beg for a seat anymore. I set the table. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever been rejected by the people who were supposed to love you, know that you are not alone. Their rejection is not your fault. Your resilience is your power. Keep working, keep building, and one day you will look back and realize that the people who tried to break you actually made you stronger. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear that they deserve a seat at the table. This is Elise. See you in the next story. And remember, a leech takes, a survivor builds. Be a builder.